our virtual book clubs today with Capstone Interactive. And I'm super excited because today I get to talk about some books that I wrote with my friend Blake Hoena. And so we thought it would be really fun to focus on the recycled art mission from Adventures in Makerspace, because we're all home and we can do things with all of the things that we have around our house. And so we're going to tell you a little bit about those books and some more that we have in the series. We were really lucky because a few years ago, Blake and I had our first 4 come out, and then about probably 6 months later, the next 4 came out. And so there are a series of 8 of these right now. They're all called Adventures in Makerspace, and I love them because, of course, they're focused around a librarian and a crew of kids that she has in her library and in her school, and does all of these great things around makerspace. If it's building or recycled art or photo missions, 3D printing, I have all of them sitting here so I can remember them all, robotics, and it's just been so fun to see kind of how they have really caught on at our school and other schools. And I love them because they're also graphic novels, and we'll talk a little bit about that. This was actually a picture that we pulled up that was in the very beginning, because now the teacher's name was not Miss S, which I've read here. So we worked with the graphic novel people that probably had something to do with it, but it's Miss Jillian. And so she still looks like that character along with the others, the kids in the books, but it was kind of fun to be able to find that, to think about that too. Now, if you haven't looked at the book or seen these books before or want to visit it again, they are all available right now in Capstone Interactive, and this is open until the end of June for all of us. So you can sign up for free access at that bit.ly at the bottom. And it's great because all of the books, they have some music and they're all read, and they have really great too the 4D capability, which is Capstone's, where you can use the technology of augmented reality and scan the code and even get to extra things inside of the books too. And so you'll have to check those out whenever you see a star in a 4D book. You scan it with the 4D app, and we'll talk a little bit about that too. I'll share that with you as well. But I'm going to let Blake kind of talk to you about when we first started this. I think one thing really cool about just working with Blake and other authors on the other series that I worked with Capstone is to think about this process. And when we talked about this idea in the very beginning, being a librarian and working in maker spaces and just collaborating with Blake was so much fun, because teaching him and sharing with him like what our library looked like and what these things look like within our space, but then hearing how Blake went about doing the research that he did for the different topics that we picked is one of, I think, the most interesting things about working with an author and books. And so I'm going to let Blake talk about that for a little bit, and just the process of not only the writing, but then when we worked with the graphic novel team too.
Hey everyone. One quick thing I wanted to say though is, if you look at the image on the right, you see the kid with the little ghost on his t-shirt. That's Matt on my blackboard back here. I just thought I'd put a little drawing up there. He's a skateboarder, and when I create stories, there's a lot of times some of the characters, I'm trying to think of characters, and sometimes I steal things from my own life. So Matt is kind of a character actually based off of myself, because he's a skateboarder, likes math, and so I just thought that was a fun little ad there for the story.
I love that.
Yeah. Well, and then sometimes I'll borrow people's names, like a couple of the characters. Cyrus, I have a friend named Cyrus. Eliza, I have a friend named Eliza. So sometimes I'll a little nod to friends of mine. I'll throw their names into books just as a creative way of saying hi. one thing I'd like to say about the writing process, because a lot of this, Shannon, it was you and I discussing ideas. And like we had ideas for, say, like I have coding mission and, 3D printing. And like the 3D printing we talked about, we wanted some sort of fairy tale story. So, I ended up taking things that I know myself, like here, the 3D printing, there's always the talking frog in fairy tales. So I thought it'd be fun to throw that in as a kind of a comical character. Everyone's a little stunned when they come across a talking frog. And in coding mission, a lot of books I write are about mythology. So I thought a great way to code something is, try and code a way through a maze. And that immediately made me think of Theseus and the labyrinth and the Minotaur. And so it was kind of cool taking that idea that Shannon, you and I talked about with coding and throwing it into one of my favorite things, a mythology story. So sending, the kids back into the maze, the labyrinth with the Minotaur.
Cool. Yeah,
And,
my favorites, the frog and like I love that. I love
yeah. I just thought it'd be funny, they come across a talking frog and they're all kind of like, whoa, what's that?
I know. That's awesome.
Yeah. But so with this story, because we talked through an idea, and you gave me a direction, the whole recycled art, and that's when I started kind of thinking about how I was going to approach this one. And the idea of creating things with recycled art, recycled materials, kind of just immediately made me think of Picasso, Pablo Picasso. I've always been a fan of his art. He's one of my favorite artists, and I've seen exhibits of his at MoMA, which is the Modern Art Museum in New York. So, there's a lot of times teachers will say, write what you know. And that's a lot of what I did with this story. Where we send the kids to in this story to a museum in New York, I've been there before. I've studied, Pablo Picasso. And so a lot of the pieces that show up in this story have to show up like one of the pieces of art is simply bike handles and a bike seat, and they form a bull's head. I've seen that piece of art, and one of my favorite pieces of art is Baboon and Young. And I talk about how Picasso created that in a story where he took one of his son's balls and placed a car on top of the ball and thought it looked like a head or the body of a monkey. And so, because I knew that, because I've seen that piece of art, I decided to throw that into the story. So it was, it's like taking your idea that you helped me kind of formulate, Shannon, and just throwing in a lot of things that I know, a lot of things I'm interested in, and sending these kids all back to the museum that I've been to. So
yeah, I think that is I think that's one of the neatest things about the books is because you can learn like so many other things from each one. And even now, like when you think about like Picasso and you think about going to a museum, not only learning a lot about the different artists and maybe ideas, but then using as they get to go back to the maker space to be able to create, it's something that like any of us can do. And now we're all at home, and so it's really fun to be able to think about, I'm just going to stop sharing so we can see each other. It's really fun to think about using things that not only that we learn in the book and maybe visiting like the museum online or looking at some of his art online to be able to do something cool at home too. Now, one thing that I find really interesting too is talk a little bit about working with the graphic novel company, because I thought that was kind of one of the most interesting processes. Just like to see how, like, maybe talk about the conversation that, conversations that maybe you had, or how did they like get a sense of like, what to feel like in the books.
So the thing I often have to explain when I talk about graphic novels, because I'm just an author. I even though I can kind of draw.
And
So
you can play like musical instruments. So
I can, yeah, I have my ukulele here too. This is my little studio, my creative space. Um, so most people are, when they think of comic books and graphic novels, they think of the art, and they automatically think the people who create them are illustrators. But there's still words that go into these stories. Someone has to think up the story. And so while I write graphic novels and comics, I actually don't illustrate things. And so there has to be this communication of me telling illustrators my ideas. And a lot of times when you look at like a comic, one of these graphic novels, let me just quick flip to a page, flip to a page, this page may have 100 words on it or so. But when I'm writing this, I have to describe what's happening in each of these panels. I have to tell the illustrator who's in each panel, what they're doing, the expressions on their face. So while, like I said, there may be 100 words on these 2 pages right here, I probably write, close to 500-600 words to describe everything. So it's kind of a cool collaborative, experience. And these books, that's what they were, because Shannon, they started off with you and I talking ideas, because you had the experience, the makerspace experience that I don't. My experience was writing graphic novels, so that was our initial start. And then once I wrote the story, we call it kind of like a script. It's almost, when you write a graphic novel, it's almost like a movie script.
Yeah.
And so then when I had the script, then it moves to the illustrator, and the illustrator looks at all the text, all the descriptions I wrote, and starts illustrating. And after that, there's a lot of this back and forth. Because if you remember when they start off by just kind of sketching their ideas.
Yeah.
Then they send those ideas to us. It's like to see if they translated what I wrote into the illustrations we want. And so there's some back and forth with that. And then after that, they start, putting the final illustrations together and colorizing things. And I can't remember if one of those panels, one of the images you showed up had all these little yellow notes on it.
Yeah.
So that's where, you and I would see the story, see what the illustrators drew, and then we'd be making notes. It's like we might say, well, this character really should be looking sad. He's kind of happy here. Or sometimes we'd even comment on the color of his shirt, or Matt has a little ghost on his all of his shirts. So we would even have to let the illustrator know that, oh, you forgot to add that to this illustration.
Yeah, I remember the her necklace or her name tag. I remember that being like a deal. Like,
yes,
they
forgot that. Yeah, they forgot that in a lot of cases. And because there are a lot of things like that a lot of those details that as we were working on, we just kind of had to keep our eye on to make sure everyone looked consistent throughout all the stories.
Yeah. Have you ever done any graphic novels before or after this?
Yes, I've written dozens of graphic novels. Trying to see if I have. I thought I had one right here. So
how many books?
Here's one of my recent. This is a recent one.
Oh, I actually have seen these because some of our kids were looking at like the catalog or something. And I thought those were so cool. Because how many books now have you written?
It's over 100.
Yeah.
I started mostly writing nonfiction, but then I kind of once was back in the early 2000s, I think. comic books and graphic novels started becoming popular again.
Mm-hmm.
And so I started really getting into writing them. And one of my, if there are anyone interested in learning more about creating comics and graphic novels, this is my Bible for learning how I learned how to write and create comics and graphic novels. It's Understanding Comics by Scott McCloud, and it's one of the books that I write. He has a couple of books. This is another one.
Oh, that's awesome. That looks really good.
Well, check this out. This is what I love about these books. So it's a book that talks about how to create comics and what is it.
Yeah, whole comic.
Yeah, so it talks about how to create comics, and it has examples in the whole book. That's what it is. It's
so
like
cool.
So.
That's really neat. So what is your favorite type of book to write? Like,
well, I really enjoy graphic novels, comics, just because of that visual element. I actually, when I was in school, this is something I like to brag about. One of my buddies back in school, you can look him up, his name is Scott Collins. We used to sit together in art class and draw. And I would draw these illustrations. Like I used to draw Doctor Strange was my favorite superhero. And I'd come in with this illustration of Doctor Strange in class. And then I would see what he drew, and I'd just be blown away. I mean, he was just such an incredible artist. He now works for DC Comics.
Oh, that's awesome.
So and there were a couple other kids that I went to school with that ended up, they're now working for Marvel and DC. So it was kind of great. And I've always liked the idea of drawing, and I've experimented with doing some of my own sketches. I just haven't gotten brave enough to create my own comic.
You totally should. Totally.
We'll see. We'll see.
There needs to be a book, one of these, about an adventure about just writing graphic novels, because that's something that kids really, I think, to like gravitate towards, because of not only like the graphic part of it, but because they really enjoy, I think, like reading in a different way, seeing what the characters' expressions are, seeing what's happening. I mean, they're just so popular, like in our library, and these have been really fun, for the kids. Another thing that about the books are just the activities. And I think that we did such a good job of thinking of the activities and how they go together. And this one is called Critter Art, which is so fun. And I love it. And again, it ties into what they learned when they were at the museum about Picasso. But I think that it's neat too, because in the books, and this is something for everyone who is listening, is in all of the books, and remember, you can find these too all online, this part is that they have these really great activities that you can do with things that you have around your house. And especially this one, because it's recycled art, we can make anything out of materials that we have. This one, of course, is a turtle. And so that's a cute one, very cute one. Did you make that turtle?
No, I did not. I don't know who did. It might have been the editor.
Yeah, I just love it. It's very cute. And one thing do you want to see my recycled art project that we did this week? So Hagen and I needed we needed some markers for our garden. And so we found some rocks, and then we painted that's Hagen's rabbit. And he also had to do an art project he's a freshman, for his art class. And so he got to do this, and then he got to mark it off that he actually did it. So these are all out in the garden. And actually Tracy, my friend who is on that I teach with, she gave me a little idea that she had seen, and so then we did our own version. But I think it's so fun because you can make anything out of any of these books. And just looking at, I pulled all of them, and I put pictures of them too, that you can get to all of them also within Capstone Interactive. But even though there are things maybe about like coding, for example, or stop motion or low tech, there's also a lot of things that we can do, that are online too. So that's pretty fun. We do this one program. I was trying to think about what it was called. There's like storyboard that, which is like graphic novels, and you can get on there and they have a free version of the account. And there's another one that we used to use, but I'm just drawing a blank of what it is, that kids can even make graphic novels online. And so kind of fun to be able to not only make them on a piece of paper, but also make your own online too.
Yeah, that would be fun, because I find, so I do a lot of presentations, or I've talked at young writers, young artist conferences around Minnesota. And I always find, because I'll ask kids who likes to write, and I'll get a smattering of hands. Then I ask who likes to draw, and everyone's hands goes up. So I always find that kind of creating stories through drawings are a great way to get people excited about telling a story, and a creative way of telling a story.
I think so too. I love that part. Like, I think that all kids, like to draw, and so when you can get them kind of hooked too on making it into, a graphic novel, I think that'd be fun. So I have to ask one last question. What are you working on right now?
Well, the thing I'm excited that I actually just finished up. So last fall, I ran my first marathon. I ran the New York City Marathon.
That's
And this spring, or actually, yeah, this spring, I just wrapped up a graphic novel on, call it mud running, running those obstacle courses where there's mud pits, you might have to climb over a wall. So I recently wrote a graphic novel about that. Yeah, it was a very fun story. It's with the illustrator right now, so I haven't seen any of the drawings yet. I'm kind of excited to wait. I think it'll be out next spring, because it's like a 64-page book, so it's a little longer than what we worked on. But it was another story that combines some of my interests. Combined running. I've run obstacle races and trail runs, and I also set it on a farm. And I grew up on a farm in central Wisconsin, so it kind of, again, I used a little bit of my personal knowledge to create the story.
Oh, that sounds great. I can't wait to read that one. I think that
like I said, I believe it's next spring it'll be released.
That's
we'll see.
I love, writing about probably the experience, and what a great accomplishment. And so that has to mean a lot to you to work on that. That's great. You always have good stuff, my friend. I'm going to share my screen just to, as we wrap up our first book club, just to show you again how you can get to the books for free, and also just to tell you the next date of our next virtual book club. And so on June 11th at 11 a.m. Central Time, again, we will be inviting another amazing Capstone author, art illustrator, to our book club to talk about books. And we really encourage you, during a book club, what you always want to do is kind of hook people on what they want to read, and talk about things that maybe interest you and show you ideas. And so not only Adventures in Makerspace, we hope that you check out all 8 of these books in Capstone Interactive, but there are tons of other books that you can read too. And like I said, this is open until June 30th for everyone to be able to sign up and to find a recycled art mission, but all of the other books that Capstone has to offer in Capstone Interactive. And you can also even get on PABLO. And so I was thinking about that this morning, and as I was just looking at some of them, if you learn about something like the turtle and recycled art mission, you can even go to PABLO and do a little research too around turtles. And so that would be super fun. But Blake, I'm so excited that you joined me for the very first virtual book club. And it was so fun to just kind of relive what we did when we wrote the books, and how fun that collaboration was. So thank you so much.
Well, yeah, it was great chatting again. We haven't had a chance to talk for a while, so Good seeing you.
Oh, it was so good to see you too. And thank you everybody for joining us. And we hope that you guys have a great day. And as you get ready to go into the summer, a great summer too. So take care and thank you.
Bye.
Bye.